Welcome to the Empower Hour with Greater Nashua Mental Health. The Empower Hour will provide information and support about mental health, substance use, and behavioral health. Our goal is to share inspiring stories about transforming lives, to strike down stigma, and to encourage our community to reach out and get help when needed. Mental health is part of all of our lives. It's time we talk about it. I'm Dr. Cynthia Whitaker, President and CEO of Greater Nashua Mental Health, and it's time to get empowered. Hello, and welcome to the Empower Hour with Greater Nashua Mental Health. I'm Dr. Cynthia Whitaker, and I have the privilege of being the CEO at Greater Nashua Mental Health. We have this show to provide our community with information about the programs we have, the partnerships we have in our community, and to just highlight many stories about recovery. I'm really excited today to highlight one of our wonderful programs, Mental Health Court. I'd like to welcome you both to the show.
Nice to be here.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you to start off with introducing yourself and tell us about May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but it's also a different month. So if you'd love to start us off.
Sure. I'm Andrea Taatjes. I am the Mental Health Court Coordinator. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, but we have two other really exciting milestones in May. It is also the National Treatment Court Awareness Month, recognizing all of the treatment courts across the country, mental health courts being one. And May is also the 20th anniversary of our Community Connections program, our mental health court program here.
Here in Nashua.
Yes, correct, here in Nashua.
All right, before we get to our fabulous graduate from the mental health court program, so you mentioned treatment courts. So treatment courts include mental health court is one of them. What else, what other treatment courts are there?
So in addition to mental health courts, we have recovery courts. Those courts are typically more focused on substance use. There's also veterans courts. There are juvenile courts. So there are multiple different treatment courts that cover all different areas. Here within Greater Nashua, we have the recovery court and mental health court.
And all of the treatment courts, the goal is to provide people with treatment instead of incarceration, if that's part of what resulted in some of the challenges that they have, right?
Correct, yes. Our goal is really to connect people with the right resources, the right treatment at the right time in order to avoid any incarcerations, which we have found reduces recidivism, which in addition to that also reduces taxpayer dollars for not having to pay for individuals to be incarcerated. And then it also increases public safety by allowing individuals to have the treatment that they need in order to live healthy, productive lives and remain out of incarceration.
Exactly. So I've worked at Greater Nashua Mental Health for 20 years. So I was around right at the very beginnings of the mental health court here in Nashua at the program, which we call Community Connections. It was started by a bunch of people getting together because there was such a disconnect between our treatment community and the law enforcement community and the legal community, and a disconnect. And some of those initial meetings, as you might imagine, were a little challenging. But finally, kind of coming together and recognizing this was an evidence-based model to use to really help people. And how cool that here we are 20 years later, celebrating by having a graduate with us. Because I think we could talk about the program all day long and what it looks like, but you sharing your story about just how far you've come, what you learned in the program is just so impactful. So thank you again for being here. And
my pleasure.
Feel free to start wherever you want to start.
When I was arrested, my attorney was very familiar with mental health court. He referred me to mental health court, referred me on a diversion program. And I didn't know what it was. I had never heard of it. And it scared me. So I said, oh, what is it? And my attorney was so busy, he just said, oh yeah, mental health court. I mean, he knew what he was doing, what was best for me, but he said, yeah, you'll be going there. So he said, you just have to check in like once a month. But I knew there was more, there must have been more. So I looked online and saw an interview with a previous court liaison of mental health court. And he explained exactly, you were interviewing him, all the features and everything about it. So it wasn't as scary.
Oh, that's great.
When I saw that interview and the purpose of mental health court. But there was still a lot I didn't know until I joined in and started my initial weekly check-ins and reviews. I wasn't sure. I pictured mental health court to be, you'd be like stand before the judge, he'd have his gavel, and okay, have you been, you know, and, but oh, it was far from that.
Yeah, so
it's been a wonderful experience.
Sounds like there's been some surprises for you in there, things that you didn't expect. You know, maybe some positive and some negative. But why don't you share so what was a positive surprise?
A positive surprise was that the judges, there was only two. One stopped, moved on after about 6 months, and then I had the other judge for a year and a half. But I think that the judges were very down to earth. And it wasn't, you didn't stand before them. It was a big conference table, and the judges would sit right there with you. And they were very warm. And the sense I got from them, which was such a pleasant surprise, they really care. The court liaison really cares. And that's the first, like, wow. You know, it's not punitive. There was no judgment at all. They were there, and after like maybe a month or two, I finally realized, wow, they're really there to help. They want us to succeed.
Yeah, I've heard it described as like having a whole team in your corner.
Yes. That's how I felt.
Yeah.
That's how I felt. Yeah.
And so you graduated from the program just a couple months ago. And how long were you in the program?
2 years.
Yeah. And what's the difference? What change have you seen in yourself from being in the program?
My confidence. I've gotten my integrity back because when you're arrested, it was the first time in my life at 56 getting arrested and having to go through that whole process. And what was your question again?
Just what's different for you in those 2 years?
Oh, yes. When I first started, I was just so scared, and my life was at its lowest it's ever been. And it changed its total trajectory of my life. But I started developing a little confidence, but I must admit the first 6 months, all I did was cry when I did my check-in review. Because there was a lot of mental health issues leading up to my arrest. And then after the arrest, the issues were still there. They were personal issues. I was under constant trauma. So I was dealing with all my personal issues as well as the legal issues. And I found that I started realizing that if I can improve my life and take suggestions from mental health court, all my appointments, it can only improve. And how it did improve was the help from the court liaison and the judges. When you go in, they will ask you, how are you doing? And it's not just a surface question. And I tried to weasel out of it one week. And I said, for the most part, it was great, a good week. And then the judge said, well, what about the other part?
Because they really wanted to know.
They do. Yeah. So you have to, or I had to let go of my ego and be vulnerable. And that's the only way I'm gonna feel better, get better, and continue with my life on an upward trajectory.
I love that somewhat irony of you had to let go of your ego to find your confidence.
Yes.
Right? Because the what you were doing was maybe a little facade, try to look good.
Yeah, of course.
But now you found your confidence in your authentic self, right?
And that's exactly what it is. What mental health court gave me was the gift of self-integrity. When you're there every review, and people are treating you with respect and kindness and not being judged and genuinely want to help, that's just priceless.
I'm curious if you would answer the question differently. Like, what change have you seen?
I mean, I would echo, what she said. I came in working, with her kind of partway through her time in mental health court, and even in this past year have seen a huge increase in her confidence. And she, one thing we always really appreciated was that you would come in and you would tell us what you needed, because we can only help as much as we know what you all need. And you came in every week or, monthly, and you said, this is what I need. This is what I need support with, so that we could provide you with that support.
Yes.
And you did show up authentically as yourself every time. And that's why, you're sitting here today, a successful graduate of the program, because you were always yourself and you told us what you needed, but you did the work.
Yeah.
You did the work.
Well, when I arrived at mental health court, I was just totally devastated. And the types of support I got, I needed it. My case manager, I had to find health insurance, housing. She took me under her wing. And at the beginning of mental health court, I needed to be spoon-fed. And I would go into her office and we would go over getting on Medicaid, and she would help me in her office with the whole application. I'd bring in my financials and my notes that I needed, and she just did it with me. She actually came to my house once because my office was just so unorganized. I had stacks of paperwork. She came to help me and get me started, and after that, I finished the project and everything became organized. But little life skills I needed help with, and mental health court will even help you with that.
I love that. It's a great segue into so certainly the court component is a big part of it.
Yes.
Mental health court, right? It's a treatment program overseen by the legal system. But you just mentioned case manager, and there's another part, the mental health part of the system. So what other kinds of supports were you involved with?
Well, with a lot of housing, I actually, the court liaison brought me to Bridges. I was experiencing intense trauma, and I was scared to go. She came with me, and that was wonderful, and I registered with Bridges and was looking for housing through them as well. But she introduced me to that resource, and that was very helpful. Very helpful for what I was experiencing. And any questions, legal questions, I've asked you questions. I will leave a message and call. And my old case manager, I like to have humor in this whole process too. I said, "Hi, it's Jody, your favorite criminal." But it's like, it's nice. You have to have that element too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you had some support finding resources that were appropriate for your case, and then actual support getting those resources, right?
Yes.
Not just here's a list, go do it.
Exactly.
But if part of your trauma or your symptoms were preventing you from doing it on your own, right there helping you with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in your role as the liaison, what does that look like for you? Like coordinating between the court and treatment providers? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I am kind of the first introduction to folks with mental health court. When I receive a referral from the court, I meet with the individual, kind of provide an overview of what mental health court looks like, the expectations. I answer any questions that they might have about mental health court. I do, kind of a preliminary screening to ensure that they're eligible. And then once they're connected to mental health court, I'm really their kind of day-to-day contact if they need any resources, any support. And then I'm also providing updates to the court each week or each month, depending on what phase the individual is in mental health court. It determines, their court frequency. So I'm providing updates to the court, and I'm really that liaison between, the individual, what resources do they need, helping them get connected to those resources, and then also reporting back to the court that the individual is, compliant with those resources. We certainly don't divulge any, specifics on what is being discussed in any of their, treatment sessions, but we're really just reporting back on whether or not they're compliant, if they're going or not.
Yeah, I can imagine for a lot of folks, your example, this was a first arrest, after you said some mental health symptoms really kind of being a big part of what led you to that spot. And so not only was there this accountability of let's hold you accountable for what happened, but let's also give you support for those symptoms that got you there.
Exactly. In my case, I was on a medication which totally exacerbated one of my symptoms, and I was on it for a long time. And when they replaced it, took me off of the one and replaced it, the whole quality of my life changed.
So someone's getting an accurate diagnosis, getting accurate treatment, really also made a big difference for you.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about who might be watching, probably family members, people thinking about entering mental health court. What do you think is important for people to know? What do you wish you had known?
About mental health court?
Yeah, about mental health court.
How just at 56, my whole life, I have never had people reach out and say, I'm here to help. I've never had people say, here, let me help you. And I want people to know, or people that are entering it, take advantage of the help. It changed my life. It did, mental health court. It really changed my life for the better. And the silver lining of the arrest would be mental health court and how it really improved. I'm always trying to improve myself and become a better version of myself. And it definitely helped with that. I was in a rut for a few years prior to getting arrested. So I sort of had to relearn life skills too, as I started mental health court. And if I can stress, definitely be involved, get to know Andrea, if there's a case manager, the judge, and you'll be golden. Just take advantage of it.
Yeah. Well, and in some ways, aren't you grateful your lawyer made the suggestion?
I am. I was really fortunate. I didn't know about mental health court, and my attorney, I was inpatient. I involuntary admitted behavioral health unit, Southern New Hampshire, and my son and my ex-husband were looking for attorneys, and they found one, and he happened to have a lot of clients that were mental health court clients. I was lucky. He knew right off the bat. He even could figure out my diagnosis on the phone. He said, "You sound bipolar," but I lucked out. He knew all about the program. He said, it would be perfect for you, and then I trusted him, but I lucked out. I would hope a lot of attorneys are aware of mental health court in the Greater Nashua area. I think that would be really helpful for clients, that the arrest had to do also due to their mental health symptoms or episodes. But a lot of attorneys aren't aware, maybe.
Yeah, it's something we've chatted about, because I feel like no matter how much we talk about it, there's always someone that doesn't know. And I know you've had many meetings trying to help people be more aware of the process and how to refer.
Yeah.
What's your feeling on awareness?
I think the awareness is definitely increasing. You know, I think doing things like this is really helpful, especially more so for family members or, you know, friends of loved ones who, you know, might be experiencing a mental health episode and are involved in the criminal justice system. We've done a lot of work with the public defender's office and done a lot of meetings with them. We have 2 public defenders that sit on the mental health court team who are really helpful in getting the word out to other attorneys in the area who might not be public defenders, might be private attorneys, because we do receive a lot of referrals from private attorneys as well. So I think just as much work we can do to really get the word out that we are here. We've been here for 20 years and we're still going to be here, just so that everybody's aware that this resource is here and it's available.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's so invaluable, right? And changing your life, your trajectory was your word. That, you know, it would be a shame for someone to not have that opportunity simply because there wasn't an awareness around them.
Exactly. And my trajectory went down after the arrest, and then it went way up again.
Yeah.
You know?
I can imagine that, right? Because when you're supported, when you have an accurate diagnosis, accurate treatment, right? Those are the things that happen. We can get back on a thriving path, right? Instead of sort of suffering alone in the unknown.
Yes.
Yeah, not helpful at all. My brain was thinking something, but then it just went whoop, far away from my brain. You were chatting about public defenders, and you mentioned, and part of your process was applying for Medicaid. But mental health court accepts anybody, right? Doesn't matter insurance, doesn't matter any of that, right?
Right. So we don't have anything to do with insurance. There are some certain legal parameters and mental health parameters in order to be eligible for the program. But all of that work is kind of done up front once somebody is accepted into the program. Certainly if they have insurance, it's helpful for, you know, putting in referrals for mental health treatment. But if they don't have insurance, you know, like in your case, we can help them get insurance. But the actual mental health court program itself, insurance is not a requirement.
So the eligibility is more around the legal requirements, right? So same thing, you didn't have to have a long history. This was the first arrest, right? So the legal requirement isn't a long history either. Like, I think sometimes people think that. And there's mental health components to it.
Correct. Yeah, you don't need to have, you know, multiple arrests. A single arrest, you know, is what we're looking for, is that somebody is willing to participate in the program. And they don't need to come in with a diagnosed mental health condition. We can do that assessment and determine if there's one there. So it can be diagnosed or suspected that there's a mental health diagnosis. But we really, I think we're geared towards individuals who maybe it is their first arrest, because, you know, we're not there to judge them on what might have been their worst day, you know, that they've had. We really want to provide them with the support and resources so that they can put this behind them. That's really, you know, our goal. We ask them to show up and be honest. We don't expect perfection, certainly. We understand that there are going to be ebbs and flows with the treatment, but we just want people to come in, allow us to support them, and just be honest about their needs.
I've heard many people who have longer histories of incarceration say that many treatment courts, whether it's recovery court, mental health court, veterans court, is actually harder work than being in prison or being in jail, because you have to be honest and work on yourself as part of the program, which isn't always easy.
No.
Well, what would you say has been like part of the hardest part of the program?
Well, I'm very conscientious, and when I'm accountable to something, which mental health court, they expect you to be accountable and not accountable. So when with my organization issues, I felt like my whole life was unmanageable at the beginning of mental health court. And they said, okay, let's choose a goal. Maybe you can do A, B, and C, and when you come back next week, I want to hear how it went. The hardest part was the week in between. There may have been some personal issues at home that I had been contending with. I might have been very upset and didn't get it done. The hardest part was going in front of the judge and saying, I didn't get it done. But that didn't happen too often, did it?
No, not at all.
Well, and it sounds like even if it did, it
Yes.
was received with respect
Yes,
and
it
kindness
was.
and
Yes.
like a curiosity of asking questions rather than punishment.
Exactly. And they're not punitive at all. And that was hard for me. But it was good for me because I had to be accountable. So the feeling I got having to tell the judge, no, I didn't get that done, it prevented me from doing it again, you know.
And I'm sure the easy parts and the hard parts are different for every person, right?
Yes.
Because we all have
Yes.
our own personalities, our own histories, our own mental health symptoms.
I'm thinking if that was a hard part, but the requirement wasn't difficult. You graduate as you go along. I first started weekly, and then you go to bi-weekly, and then you graduate every 3 weeks.
Monthly.
Oh,
usually.
or monthly. But I wanted to come every other week. So wasn't I able to come every 3? I said, no, I want to come every 2. I didn't want to cut down.
Because you needed the accountability.
Yeah,
or enjoyed
and
it,
the
yeah?
support.
Love that.
It was so wonderful. I would have gone weekly and not complained. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think when it is such a nurturing, supportive
Yes.
experience, especially if that's not what your experience was right prior to that,
Exactly.
it is something to almost look forward to.
I did.
Yeah, yeah. Is that common? Do you see that in folks that are doing successful and kind of on the right path?
Yeah, we have quite a few people who we've said, you know, you're doing a really great job. We think it's time for you to come bi-weekly or for you to come monthly. And they're like, well, I'd still like to come, you know, just as frequently. And we absolutely welcome that. We say it is only a requirement that you come once a month. But if you want to come every week, every 2 weeks, you are more than welcome to come. You know, it's whatever they need in the support that they're looking for. But we want to reward them with less required check-ins, but they are always welcome to come any week that they would like that extra support.
So even if somebody had a tough week and they're not required to be there, they could just show up for that support.
I snuck in once. Because I had a really rough week. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine and that would be helpful to, you know, getting
Yeah.
back on track or staying on track or.
You get to know people and even your fellow mental health court participants. It's nice to hear what they're going through. We all have different stories. And so you feel a little camaraderie if you see the same people in your group for your review every time.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my kind of follow-up questions because I think there is a lot of power in hearing each other's stories. Like you sharing your story today with people is very powerful, but hearing people's stories all along the journey keeps you inspired too.
It does.
Yeah. Were there any moments where you really felt inspired?
At the graduations. I loved it. The graduates, one by one, would go up and get their diploma, and the court liaison person like Andrea will speak or say something, and even the judges will get up and speak and shake their hand and say what a good job you did. And some of them would share their story. You know, when I came in, I was homeless. I didn't have a job, but here I was able to find a job, find an apartment, And that gave me so much inspiration. The graduations, hearing them say that, because during the course of the reviews before they graduate, it's just the daily grind of getting things done, but hearing the actual progress and what, and the result of that was inspirational.
So in your 2 years in mental health court, you attended other people's graduations.
Yes.
And then other participants attended yours.
Yes.
Right?
And we
so
didn't have one yet.
Well, we had a mini one, where you got your certificate.
Yes, we did.
And the judge did, commend you. But yes, we're working on a larger celebration.
A bigger ceremony.
Like before, everyone could come. Like a few different judges would come.
Nice.
All the participants would be invited. We're encouraged to go there too, which I'm glad I did.
Yeah. It seems like a very rewarding experience, and so in many ways you get to do that here.
Yes.
But nice to be able to do that there as well.
Yeah.
In a way that celebrates. Yeah, that's cool. What haven't we talked about that you would hope we talked about the program? Either of you, it's fine.
I think one of the big things is that, I know we talked a little bit before about you don't need to have a large criminal history. It can be a one-time, offense, but we do have 3 different tracks for the program that folks can come in. One is, their case can be deferred after a year. One is that, maybe the individual has pled guilty or been found guilty of a crime and they have a suspended or deferred sentence. If they participate in mental health court after a certain amount of time, they don't have to serve that time in jail. And then our 3rd track is our bail supervision track. So that is individuals who are currently incarcerated. As a condition of their bail, they can participate in mental health court. So that really gets at the piece of connecting individuals with the right treatment sooner. So it gets them out of jail, it gets them connected to resources, has the accountability of mental health court, so hopefully they don't have to return to jail. So that's something that we are really proud of, that we have that track, because as I mentioned, it gets them out of jail much faster than if they had to sit there and wait for their charges to go through the criminal justice system, which can take a little while. So we like to get them out sooner rather than later.
And also like a little bit of like if your lawyer hadn't known right away, right? Maybe there are other opportunities, and if family members learn more about a program, it could still be worth talking with someone about their eligibility for it. So thank you for going over those 3 tracks. I think that's very important. How about you? Is there something we haven't chatted about related to mental health court that you would want to add?
Well, prior to mental health court, I was very fortunate. I was imagining participants in mental health court that it was definitely a mental health issue that led them to where their story was with mental health court. But the ones that didn't have experience with they hadn't been diagnosed yet or even seen a mental health professional. I always used to be like, wow, I'd feel bad, but I would see Andrea and the judge, and they'd be right on top of it. And within a week, they'd have appointments with their psychiatrist. And I was lucky. I was fortunate. I've been going to Greater Nashua Mental Health for 20 years. And I had my doctor in place, all my treatment plan in place. I go to my DBT classes. And I really admired the folks that came in without any treatment at all. And that must have been scary too.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of what you were saying. Like people don't have to come in with a diagnosis.
Correct. Yeah, they can come in with a full team with a diagnosis, and we just work with them to ensure that that's the right treatment, to have the accountability piece. But we also accept individuals who have maybe no documented mental health history, they don't have any providers, and we get them connected to whatever those services may be. If it's outpatient counseling, if it's, medication management, we connect to, intensive outpatient. We really want to meet them where they're at And so whatever services that they need, that they think will help them to be successful, we work with them to get those referrals put in place. And get them connected, hopefully with very minimal time in between of coming into mental health court and getting started with their providers.
Yeah, you just made me think of something else. I think sometimes people don't want to be part of mental health court because they think they have to be part of Greater Nashua Mental Health treatment. And while we are there and welcome anybody into that, it's not a requirement. The requirement is that they get the treatment that's best for them. And if it's available somewhere else, you're monitoring that and working with that other provider.
Yeah, absolutely. If you come in and you've been working with a therapist, we absolutely allow you to continue to work with that provider who you've been connected with. My role is just to make sure that you're continuing to work with that provider, but you absolutely can work with any treatment provider that you would like to. We are lucky enough to have a very large team at Greater Nashua to be able to connect individuals with. But there are also many other wonderful providers in the area that folks are welcome to work with. And they can come in with that provider, or we can connect them to external providers as well.
Yeah, I think that's important, right? Because though we're the provider of mental health court, it's really on a lot on your shoulders to monitor and make sure folks are just getting the treatment that's right for them.
Right. And I know we've talked a lot about Nashua, district court, but we also have a mental health court in Merrimack District Court as well. So we operate out of both courts.
Yes. Yeah. Important. Right. Exactly. So and there are other mental health courts across the state.
Yes.
Trying to be a little bit more statewide than we are. We're not quite there yet, but maybe something to look forward to. But yes, we are in Nashua and Merrimack courts.
I noticed that in Nashua, my experience, the judges, the public defenders, sometimes there would be prosecutors at the review, law enforcement individuals at each review. But I found that, I'm trying to remember. Sometimes my thought leaves, but they're all very invested and care about the program. And I didn't know if all courts, like in different areas of the state, were as cohesive with law, with mental health court, all cohesive in Nashua. Is it like that with the others?
I think that is kind of the gold standard, and that's best practice to have all of those parties come to the table. I think everybody's kind of working towards that. I can't say with 100% certainty that every single mental health court across the state operates that way.
Yes.
That certainly is, best practice to do so. And so that's why we strive really hard to make sure that we have all of those parties come to the table to provide the support. But I know that the other teams across the state are working towards that.
Yes.
And I think we have the benefit of having been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of the other courts in other parts of the state are a lot newer than that. And so, trying to figure that out and build those relationships, sometimes that takes time for people to trust. So I have no doubt if they're not there now, they will be.
Right.
Because it is what's needed.
Yes.
Right? From your observation, especially. Well, I want to give you any last word of inspiration, awareness, whatever you want to add.
Don't give up. Give it a chance, no matter how low you feel. And it's anyone coming into mental health court, at least for me, it was like the worst moment of my life. Just listen, do what's suggested, and ask for help. And, it might take a month or so to get acclimated to the program, but don't give up. And ask for help when you need it. That's what, they're there. You have support. Why wouldn't you?
That sounds to me like good advice for any of us.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? To not give up and to keep asking for help. Because there is support there often for us, even when
if it wasn't for the support I got, I wouldn't have grown like I've grown.
Yeah. Well, I deeply appreciate you coming and sharing your story of
Thank
success.
you for having me.
You are what a successful graduate looks like. We've had many over the years, and I deeply appreciate you sharing your story, and Andrea, for what you do to support all the participants. It's really meaningful. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Whitaker.
you.
And thank you for watching this episode of the Empower Hour with Greater Nashua Mental Health. Have an empowered day.